Hi everyone, Mollusk here. This is going to be a video to show you a simple way to choose your Warhammer army. Fantasy or 40k, it doesn't matter. I've seen other videos out there that offer some useful help with whittling down the list of candidates, but very often I notice the last choice between two is left unresolved. So this video is going to show you a system you can use to resolve such problems of indecision and help you feel comfortable in your choice. It's not a discussion of the pros and cons of each army. There are plenty of great websites and videos that can introduce you to the armies if you look around, and I recommend you do familiarise yourself with the options before using this system. If you didn't already know, this hobby can be expensive in terms of time and money, and so you really want to get this choice right first time. So what I've created here is an Excel file. We'll start with fantasy. I've set up a list of all the factions in alphabetical order. You can see it here. I've just duplicated it across. I've made a few headings with factors I consider important for making my decision. Maybe you can think of other factors that are important to you, like army popularity or playstyle detail perhaps, but I think these are the basic factors and I'm going to stick with them to keep it simple. Fluff refers to the lore, backstory or character of the army. Every army has their own flavour. This is what sets up the narrative for the battles you'll fight and allows you to get really wrapped up in the game. Aesthetic refers to how the models actually look, how enjoyable they are to paint, which believe me is an important factor, the potential for colour schemes, what the opportunities there are for conversion, that kind of thing. By game power, I mean how the force tends to perform on the tabletop. For those that don't know, there tends to be a bit of a tier system in this game. Some armies have access to builds with greater probabilities of winning games, although these armies do change over time. Now, what I'm going to do is rank each army according to my feelings for each factor. Although, just before we start, I'm going to come clean and admit that Beastmen are my favourite army. But let's put this to the test. Okay, so what I've done here is take this list that was below and order it according to my preference, according to this factor. You'll notice that the order here has changed. This is to help us later when we are working out the total scores. In order to score, I simply give each army the number corresponding to where it is on the list. So there are 15 armies, so I give the top one 15, the next one down 14, and so on. And this will help us develop our total scores. Just to give you some idea as to my thought process here, let's just talk about this briefly. Previously I said that the Beastmen are my favourite army. Now you might be saying, well then why have you given Skaven the top slot? My answer is that in terms of lore I find it quite difficult to choose between the two. In fantasy I tend to like bestial factions, but for me an army should have a dark, gritty feel and have an amusing element and plenty of scope for irony. The Beastmen and Skaven both fit this very well. I love the crude, machoistic and tragic nature of the Beastmen, and the twisted fairy tale style with which they're often portrayed really does it for me. Plus, they're goats that eat people. How great is that? On the other hand, I really like the arcane science and treacherousness of the Skaven. Ultimately, what it comes down to is the Skaven's backstory is just better developed than the Beastmen's, and it's almost certainly always going to be that way. So in terms of aesthetic, my ranking is as shown here. Beastmen are top. I just really love the models. The Centaur, the Bestigor, the Ungor, the normal Gore. even the Jabberslide, just excellent. We won't talk about the Pumbagore. Well, or the chariots, actually. I think they do need some new chariots. The Skaven dropped a little bit under the Lizardmen, simply because I think you can have such attractive colour schemes with the Lizardmen, and many of the new models are great. But you know, maybe we'll see. Maybe this will change when new Skaven models come out. Let's move on to game power. So you might notice that in this table I already have some numbers, and I got them from this website. It's a very good website. I recommend you check it out. And what this is the results from a poll of 291 people registered on this site, gamers in the community, I guess. And here, this column represents people's ratings of the armies, different armies' comparative strengths. And I think that represents the game quite well as I know it. Maybe you can find a better statistics site, but this is just the one I'm going to go for. So let's just plonk these in here and get rid of these. Okay, so there we have each of our 3 factors and the armies ranked and scored within them. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to reorder each of these tables and total up the scores in this column, and then we should be able to work out which of the armies I would be best off choosing to collect. So, using Excel's handy functions, that was not handy. Oh, I see what it did. Take out the headers. There we go. There we go. There we go. And we take the sum of each of these and apply the formula to all of the armies. Now you may have spotted this subtotal table down here, and this is because game power is not really something that influences me very much. I don't really care about having, you know, the strongest army. In fact, I quite like the challenge of you know, perhaps a less optimum army. So I don't really want this to influence my choice so much. So this subtotal is going to ignore the scores from this table and only concentrate on these ones. So just while everything is like this, I will put these together. And then we can come back to this table in a moment. And it's helpful to paste the values so that when we change the order back, they stay the same. So it's just for convenience, the largest to smallest, and then we've got our order back. Good old Excel. Okay, so now we can reorder these and find out which of the armies I would be best off going for. So, according to this method, the best army choice for me is the Lizardmen. I think that's fairly solid. I really like their background, I really like their models, and where are they? They seem to be fairly strong on the tabletop, or at least middle tier. The next choice being Skaven, and Beastmen dropping some way due to them being rated one of the worst armies in the game. However, as I said before, I'm not particularly fussed about gaming power, so let's see what my subtotal looks like. And let's add a bit of colour. And there we have it. Beastmen, Skaven and Lizardmen as the top three, with Beastmen taking the crown. I know in my heart this is right, and just looking down the list, actually, the order isn't that bad. I think it works most of the way down the table for me. Now it might be that your top two armies are drawn on points, and if that happens, what I'd recommend is you add some more factors to your criteria and try to work things out that way. The more you have, the less likely, I imagine, you are to get drawed slots. Ultimately, you don't want to be looking down this list and saying, oh, I wish Ogre Kingdoms had been up here somewhere. If that happens, then perhaps you're missing some important factors, or perhaps a factor like game power, which doesn't particularly concern you so much, is skewing things, and you should get rid of it. Just to show you, I did the same thing for Warhammer 40,000. I'm only familiar with the 5th edition, haven't really branched out into the newer stuff yet, which explains some of the army names on this list. If we look, the army I probably should be going with is Space Wolves, based on the game power, but again, game power is not particularly important. So the Kroot came out on top, which is great. Absolutely love the Kroot. They're easily my favourite species in 40k, and probably in all of Warhammer. However, I can't stand the Tau, which is the army they're designed for. And as you may know, the Kroot aren't an officially individual army anymore. This hobby takes quite a lot of investment, and there's a lot to be said for orthodoxy. Therefore, looking at the list, the Dark Eldar come out second, and the Tyrant is third. I like them both a lot, but I think I like the Deldar playstyle better. So I'm happy in my heart to say that they're the orthodox faction I favour the most. So what I've decided to do is make a Kroot counts as Dark Eldar army, with Kroot units interspersed with the Dark Eldar ones I like, in a sort of warrior slave inspired theme that I think will offer some nice opportunities for game narratives. So that's what you can do in case of situations like that. And to get the game score, game power rankings, I went to this website and looked at this table. Now obviously this is a older edition, and I'm sure there are more up-to-date sites that you can use. Anyway, that's my recommendation for how you choose your army, and I hope it might be helpful to you.